Neat booking, Matt. At lightweight, we have the bull John Makdessi representing Montreal, Quebec, Canada, taking on Chile's Ignacio Bahamondes. His nickname is La Jaula. And if you've ever heard that, I've heard it in Combate broadcasts before, and it went way over my head. Ignacio Bahamondes' nickname in English is The Cage. And if you're John Makdessi, you're probably going to think like The Cage, like La Cage, which is a restaurant in Quebec. La Cage au Spa. They got great wings, great pizza, great entertainment. La Cage au Spa. But in a fight like this, it's really interesting. John Makdessi just celebrated his 10th year with the UFC. That doesn't happen very often. And in his last fight, he took on Francisco Trinaldo in the card where Brazil was closing. And he lost that fight handily by decision. And by John Makdessi's own account, his leg was giving up on him. Like, it was starting to buckle. He had to come back and have ACL surgery in Canada. And that's the really big talking point for me in this fight for John Makdessi. If John Makdessi was coming into a fight against Ignacio Bahamondes even a couple of years ago, I'd be hot and heavy all over John Makdessi. But he had ACL surgery. And in an interview with the great Canadian James Lynch with Pub Sports, James pressed John on the injury, and he said, when did you get back to training? And John kind of got around it a little bit, and then he came back to it. The response was like mid-February, after the New Year's. Man, I don't like that. Like, he's been off for a long time. That Trinaldo fight, if we go back and look at that, was 11 months and 3 weeks ago. So almost a full year ago. He had ACL surgery. And oh, by the way, John Makdessi's been a guy that's trained out of TriStar in the past. He's been in GSP camps before. He's trained at Rufus Sport with Pettis and so on and so forth. If you look, and this is tough, you got to watch the interviews to get this knowledge. He's training out of MMA Lab right now in Arizona. He's going to have Benson Henderson in his corner for this fight, as well as Javier Torres. I like that. Like, listen, MMA Lab's making moves and starting grooves, just like Fight Ready. I mean, Arizona's really starting to get some great fighters and great coaches together. So it is a great gym. John Makdessi's almost 36, major ACL surgery. It scares me off a little bit. And for John Makdessi, a guy that in his overall 17 UFC fights, he has landed 0 takedowns. 0 takedowns. He is a striker if there ever was a striker. Ignacio Bahamondes weighed in 168.5 his last fight at welterweight. And he's been a welterweight before. He was a skinny welterweight. Now he's going back down to lightweight. He's 6'3". Who are you, James Vick? Will Chope? I mean, Will Chope in a few weeks is going to be fighting 2 guys with Fight Circus. Is that going to be Ignacio Bahamondes one day? I don't know. But Matt, we've seen the striking out of Ignacio, a guy that trains at a VFS academy with Bilal Muhammad, so on and so forth. It's such an interesting fight. There's a huge question mark for Makdessi, and I've seen Bahamondes at 55 before in his way up. There's so many question marks.
I'm really glad you brought up John Makdessi's ACL, because here's the thing. My Twitter DMs are full of people saying, hey, stop talking about ACLs. MMA is not basketball. But here's the thing. John Makdessi is 36 years old, basically. He's going to turn 36 in 3 weeks. You're the same age as LeBron James, and you tore your ACL. If LeBron tore his ACL, everyone in the world on TV would say that it's over for him. He's never going to compete again. John Makdessi openly admitted that he barely trained for almost 9 months leading up to this fight. Nina Ansaroff had a kid, and now she's fighting, and I'm more confident in her training regime leading up to her fight against Mackenzie Dern. There just are a lot of question marks around John Makdessi, and I like what you brought up. He is not a wrestler whatsoever. When I think of John Makdessi, he is that great striker. The thing is, he's a really weird striker, because I don't think he has great power by any means, and he doesn't really have the best output of all time. He just kind of has average at both. Now, he's a very technically sound fighter, and the one thing I always do like about John Makdessi, he always has his hands in a very good defensive place. He's great at moving his hands out, moving them down. I know that seems like a small wrinkle, but it's true. Good MMA defense isn't something that you see that often, but for John Makdessi, he does do a great job of keeping his head defended. And I know I kind of made fun of him before this, but the Ross Pearson fight, Ross Pearson nowhere near his prime, but it was just a great fight. And if you have a fight of the night, it means that it was competitive on both sides. But the thing that set John Makdessi apart in that fight was his ability to land on Ross Pearson and not get hit in return. And that's something Makdessi does very well. My issue going into this fight is, if you're only really fighting on one leg, and I'm going to bring up another basketball reference, Tim Duncan. I never saw Tim Duncan play in his prime. I can openly admit that. I saw Tim Duncan win a title, but the later half of his career, he was really only playing on one leg because he had so many injuries. He was just that good that he could still be an all-time great. I don't think John Makdessi is that transcendent talent that even if you do have a major injury at this age, it won't affect you. I think his style will hide some of what that ACL reconstruction might have taken away from him. I like the fact that he doesn't go for a lot of takedowns because that's a lot of explosion that goes on your joints, on your ligaments, and Makdessi might not have that same explosion that we sort of were used to in his earlier UFC tenure. But that's the other thing about Makdessi. This fight is really going to prove how much MMA experience matters in a fight. Because for Ignacio, you had mentioned it. He's the taller guy. He's the taller striker. And that is what I kind of want to bring up when I talk about Makdessi's ability to get in and get out. He can do that against smaller fighters and against fighters who are around his size. When he does fight taller, rangier strikers, they pick him apart at range. And I know the example I'm about to bring up might not be a great one. Go back and look at John Makdessi versus Cowboy Cerrone. That's one of the worst fights of all time and one of the most one-sided fights of all time. Makdessi should have been in there. It was a massive mismatch to begin with, but you look at what Cowboy was able to do to him, and I don't think Ignacio Bahamondes is near where Cowboy was in his prime at 155, but just from a physical standpoint and their size, they do match up very well at 155, and I do think the range of Bahamondes will give Makdessi a lot of issues, because Makdessi's game does involve him taking a few shots, although he is good defensively, but walking into range and being sound enough defensively to not get hurt as he gets into range. I just don't know if he's going to be able to do that against the much younger and much rangier striker in Ignacio.
If you go look at Ignacio's last fight, he took on a guy in Edson Gomez that was really like if George Costanza was a fighter. He's 5'8" and weighed 174 pounds. Like, he woke up on the couch and decided, you know what? Screw the Cheetos. We're fighting
Who's
today.
the catcher for the Blue Jays?
Alejandro Kirk.
Better
Kind of
than
like
size.
that. 5'7", 265.
Ooh.
But in a fight like this for Ignacio Bahamondes, I talked about it. I mean, Valley Flow Striking Academy. You've got Luis Taylor, former PFL champ. You've got Bilal Muhammad, Juliana Pena. You've got Macy Barber there as well. Like, there's a lot of good talent. But if you watch Ignacio fight, he's very much a kickboxer. Which is why I say, for John Makdessi a few years ago, probably would have picked apart Ignacio Bahamondes. And if you look at Bahamondes, for a guy that has 35, 36 pro or kickboxing fights, amateur pro, what have you, he's defensively a little flawed. He gets hit. He got hit clean by Gomez. I've seen him get hit clean before. You look at the 5-on-in. He lost a few fights ago to Salvador Becerra over with Combate. That was a year and 3 months ago by decision. Before that, again, level competition. Hugo Flores, 7-1. Javier Reyes Salcedo, 0-3. But again, you like to see finishes. He beat Chris Breezy with LFA by decision. And listen, Chris Brown in MMA, not that Chris Breezy. Does he have the dance moves on the outside? Maybe. But you know when you fight Chris Brown, he's always going to give you a good fight. And he's the type of guy that can counter-strike on the outside and kind of... He understands energy in a fight. And I know I'm starting to go down a Robin Black rabbit hole. But he understands, like, I can roll with the punches and counter-strike back. That was a really good fight if you want to go back and see it. Makdessi could definitely fight like Brown did in that fight against Bahamondes. Again, it was a split. I had it 2 rounds for Bahamondes to the 1 for Brown. But in this fight, again, 2 years ago, I would have had Makdessi overwhelmingly. But the ACL scares me. The odds, Makdessi opened a plus 100. He's now plus 156. For Bahamondes, opened a minus 120. He's now a minus 191. Bahamondes, big favorite in this one. Makdessi's been off for a while. He also has a beard now. He's going to have, like I said, Javier Torres in the corner as well as Benson Henderson. And again, we've talked about the MMA lab time and time again about the level of training partner there and so whatever you can get out of those guys there. The other thing for John Makdessi, you talked about it. He's 4th all-time in lightweight significant strike defense at 70.4% behind Miles Jury, Frankie Edgar, and Nasrat Haqparast. And you mentioned it. This guy's so good defensively, but can he do it in a fight where he's definitely going to get pressured here?
I don't think he can. That's my issue. Against taller fighters, he does tend to struggle. Even look back at the Trinaldo fight, and I know he thought he won that fight. He thought it was a close fight.
And he had the knee injuries going into it.
But it is an issue. As long as you don't plant your feet in front of John Makdessi, you can evade some of his strikes. I know I talk about how good he is defensively, and you think about him as that primary striker, but his punches don't have the biggest amount of pop on the end of them. If you are a guy in Bahamondes who can just stay at range, pick him apart as he comes in, and make sure you move your feet so you don't get backed up towards the cage, I think you should be able to win this. If John Makdessi, let's say the legs at 100%, everything's good, maybe he does have a path to victory. I just don't like the output from Makdessi, and if he can't get to Ignacio, I don't really know how he's going to be able to land with power.
1,030 30 total votes on Topology. 62% have Bahamondes to win, 62% by knockout. The 38% that have Makdessi, 79% by decision. I'm going to go with the younger fighter here out of Chile with La Jaula, Ignacio Bahamondes to get the win. Again, I think he's going to pressure the fight. I think he's going to throw a fair amount of kicks. He switches stance really quick and on the fly. He also changes levels quite a bit too. I like the striking out of Bahamondes, and there's too many question marks around Makdessi. Hey, maybe the bull proves me wrong in this one.
Perhaps.
That would be kind of neat. But Matt, both of us going with Chile's Ignacio Bahamondes to get the win. Really looking forward to the entire card. We have 15 fights slated for this Saturday, including a great main event between Marvin, Vettori, and Kevin Holland. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. As we always say, let's get into it.